If you look at the statistics of the suicide rate of the 101st when we came back in 2011, you'll notice that the suicide rate is the highest or one of the highest in the Army.
All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Trace the Burnout. I'm Dan.
And I'm Roger.
And today we have Artilleryman and soon-to-be published author Joseph Fontenot with us. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Outstanding. Every day's an adventure.
We're doing very good, thank you.
So we get started the same way. Does your family have a history of service?
We have a couple of guys in my family that have served recently. One in the Navy, my cousin Nicky. He served about 25 years and retired. My cousin Travis was Force Recon. He did, I believe, 6 years. And my cousin Jean was in the Air Force. I think he did around 25 years and retired. And he's still, he works for the Department of Defense.
Okay, so you guys are your family's kind of all over the board.
Yeah, we kind of stretched it out. Currently, I have I joined. I have currently my nephew is also in the field artillery, and he is a specialist. I believe he's getting ready to PCS, and my godchild is a drill sergeant leader at the United States Army Drill Sergeant Academy over at Fort Jackson.
I've mentioned it before on the show. I can't remember whose episode it was, but I had the opportunity to do a fourth year as a drill, to go and be an instructor at the Drill Sergeant Academy, and I said no.
I did my first year as a drill sergeant, as a regular drill, as a basic training drill at Echo 313 at Fort Jackson, and I had an opportunity to go and interview to be a drill sergeant leader, and 100% wanted to go and take that opportunity. But that was back when it was the United States Army Drill Sergeant School. And I can tell you that I was very happy that I took that opportunity. I met some of the best non-commissioned officers that I worked with in my career. It shaped me as a leader, and I am thankful that I was able to serve at that schoolhouse. I was able to serve with Drill Sergeant Leader Lawson. He was an infantryman. He was one that helped me to shape our platoon, and we basically made sure that the term infantilleryman made its home at the United States Army Drill Sergeant School, and we were the originators of the Black Sheep Platoon before it became the Black Sheep Company at the Drill Sergeant School.
Well, that is down the line, so we're going to go back to the beginning. So your parents were not in service.
No.
So what led you to join?
So my reason for joining was because of my son. To be honest with you, I played music for about 14 years. During that time, I would consider a pretty successful career as a bassist. I played in several well-known bands. I'm not going to name drop anybody, but anybody who's curious can do their own Google search of my name, and I'm sure they can find out what those bands were. Uh, However, one of the bands were on tour. We ran into, I'm assuming it was probably a National Guard unit while we were on tour with MOD in Crisis in New York. And I told this kid, "Thank you for his service." And at that time, he said, no need to thank me. I do what I do for my family." And at that time, I was 30 years old at that time, and I remember thinking like, "Wow, this kid's got more direction in his life than I do at 30 years old." And at that time, I made my decision that when we were done with the tour, that I was going to join the Army. And sure enough, I got home, called our record executive, Paul Bassman, and told him that I was joining the Army. Um, Shortly after, went to MEPS. Initially, I was going to join the Navy. uh, Ironically enough, that didn't work out because they said I had too many tattoos, which at the time I hardly had any tattoos.
Well, we all know the Navy frowns on swearing and tattoos.
Well, all I know is I guess it was a blessing somehow. I did not go in the Navy. They kicked me around. I was really upset. Got back, just so happened that the Army recruiter was next door, walked in, said, "Do y'all have any issues with my tattoos?" They said no. I walked back over, got my packet, slammed it on somebody's desk, and said, "What can you offer me?" And initially they said, "How is your credit?" And I said, "It's hot garbage." And they said, "Awesome. What what do you want to do?" And I said, "Infantry." And at the time, they, knowing what I know now, it was complete lie. But uh, they said infantry is not available. How about artillery? And I said, "Show me a video." They showed me a video, and I said, "When can I leave?" And they said, "Probably in about 2 months." And I said, "Sign me up." And January January 6th, 2006, I was sitting at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Nice. Dan, in the artillery, we call that a target of opportunity.
That is not just an artillery phrase. That is certainly sure.
Joe, I'm a former artillery guy. I did it for about 4 or 5 years, and I couldn't cut it, so I went special operations after that. So,
Roger was actually at one point a real soldier.
Yeah. So when I was stationed in Korea, I really wanted to be special forces. That was something that was on my to do list. It was something that I wanted to do. So I went to combatives level one. I had a chance to go to combatives level two the very next week, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go and knock that out." Like I figured that was something that would help me somehow, and during selection, Q course, something. So I went to combatives level two, and on the very first day, I didn't even make it past warm ups. Some guy that was doing warm ups got fatigued. We were doing standing frog jumps. I jumped over him, and instead of kneeing the guy in front of me in the back of the head, I turned my leg and ruptured my ACL, MCL, and meniscus. And that pretty much ended that whole journey of special forces. Like I wanted to go again when I got to Fort Campbell, but deployment after deployment just never happened.
Deployments and injuries have a way of disrupting everybody's plans.
they shape your career in a way that
Yeah.
most of us would never even understand or dream of at the very beginning of our career. Were you at Camp Hovey when you're in Korea?
I was right across from the Iron Triangle.
I know it well.
Okay, so you came in 2006,
Yep.
and you were already 30 years old, which is significantly older than 95% of the
We'll say the
trainees.
average, Dan. Just say the average.
Uh, was that hard to adjust to?
No, no,
No.
there was honestly there was no adjustment period at all whatsoever. For me, I think I came in with the mentality of bottom line. If you had stripes on your chest, are you in a rank that you were you've been in long enough to tell me that like what needed to get done? Chances are you earned some level of authority to tell me that something needed to get done. So I just took it for granted that it needed to get done. So like I didn't really buck the system. I just took it for granted that something needed to happen. So just made it happen,
Yeah.
and it was.
Sometimes with the, and I'm sure that you've seen this from your own experience, but sometimes with with older personnel that are joining the service late, they already have accrued life experience, and they can't really handle the age gap sometimes between their leadership being younger than they are and being told what to do by somebody who is less life experienced.
So I had a drill sergeant. His name was Drill Sergeant Torres Garza, and I remember very distinctly. He told me once upon a time, my name is Drill Sergeant Torres Garza, not Torres. I'm a real Mexican. We have two last names, and and I thought that was I thought that was real clever, and I'm still friends with him to this day, and I think the world of him. He's an amazing person, but he asked me when I was in basic training, "What are you going to do when you get to your unit and you have an 18-year-old that's telling you what to do?" And I remember telling him that exact thing. I figured he earned his position somehow by doing what he needed to do and getting the experience that he needed to get. So I'm just going to do what I need to do until I get to that point, and then once I get to that point, then I'll follow suit. And but yeah, I agree with you. I've seen the flip side of the coin where there's some guys that walk with that chip on their shoulder, and they feel like I'm older, so I have life experience. So you need to listen to me. But that's not the way. That's not the way the world works in the army. Unfortunately, you have that flip of the coin where you made the choice to switch sides from civilian to army or whatever branch you chose, and now you have to you have to swallow your pride and you have to listen to the person that has the authority.
Well, Joe, what you've just described is a very measured, reasonable, and mature way to approach. And I don't want to get too much down the path on that. What was the best nickname that you had as a 30-year-old private?
God. Uh, so we'll we'll go back to Drill Sergeant Torres Garza. So when I was in basic training, um, I suffered a high inguinal hernia, and I had to
I've been
have
there.
I had to have my first surgery in basic training, and I had to have it um, right in the end of basic training. And in order for me to cross over from basic training into the AIT portion of OSIT, I had to take the final uh, PT test of basic training, and that was literally within days of having my surgery. So I took the PT test and I passed it. And so old Drill Sergeant Torres Garza gave me the nickname Old Funky Nuts. And if you can believe it, he got stationed at Fort Campbell when I was in 3rd Brigade as a Rakkasan. He got stationed over as operations as a master sergeant in 3rd Brigade, and he was like, "Hey, meet me over at the 101st Sew Shop outside of 41A." And I said, oh, "Okay."
I see where
And he
this is
said,
going.
he said, "You'll know me. I have a orange sports car." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I parked my truck and I got out and I'm like looking for him, and I just hear, "Hey, Funky Nuts!" And I was like, "You have got to be kidding me!" Like, no way, this is real. But yeah,
He was in the lowrider that had the switches. Yeah.
no, no, it was
Okay.
it was a it was a super nice car, but
All right. All right.
Okay, so the Navy blew you off. The Army showed you an artillery video, and you were like, I'm down for that."
yeah.
So when you went to AIT and you went to learn your artillery craft, was it everything the video promised you it would be?
Um, you know, I'm not going to say no. Um, it was everything that I hoped it would be. Um, when I went to AIT, I got partnered up with a buddy of mine by the name of Monty Lass. And Monty's probably one of the best guys that I've met in my Army career, and we still keep in touch to this day. We were stationed in Korea together. Uh, Whenever we left Korea, I went to the 101. He went to, unfortunately, he went to Fort Bragg, and then he decided that he was going to go to selection. And I want to say he made it through selection, got selected, went through the Q course, and then for some reason dropped out of the Q course. Ended up in a infantry battalion, and then he ended up getting hit in Iraq with a secondary um, IED. But I kind of went off course there. But anyways, he and I were partnered up in OSIT together. And I can tell you that he made my experience as an artilleryman what it was. He showed me that, like, if you're partnered up with somebody who's as passionate as you are about learning your job and about being a soldier in general, then it's the job is going to be amazing. Um, when we went out there, learning to be advon is probably one of the most boring jobs that you can learn. Roger, that you said you were artillery, right?
I assume you're talking. Yes, I assume you're talking about laying in survey and doing all that stuff.
Yeah. So, like, going in and setting up for your howitzers to come in as advon is it's elementary stuff. However, if you go to 13 Bravo AIT right now, as it stands right now, it is not even on the curriculum. Because right now everything's going so much towards digital that unfortunately the graded operations that we take for granted, such as advon, things that we learned back in the day that were all like hands on, that we went out and you know we learned, everybody went and learned these skills together. That's what made artillery fun. And then when you had a shelter half, and like if you hated the person that you were with, you either slept under the sky or you set up a shelter half, because it was what it was. But the first time you put a round downrange and you felt the fury of a 105 or 155 round, you were either hooked and you loved it, or you knew that you were in the wrong place. For me, I knew that I was in the right place. I I
Standing next to a 155 that's shooting its max charges, Dan, it's breathtaking. And by that I mean, no, it will knock the breath out of you. You'll fall on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was when I was in OSIT and we went and shot. Unfortunately, we didn't shoot on every piece from what I remember. And I was on a 119er. And back then it wasn't an Alpha 3, so it wasn't digital. So I was on a 119er, and then I got stationed in Korea. So as soon as I got to Korea, I was in a Paladin. So my first experience with a 155 round was inside of a Paladin, and I can tell you that the experience was astronomically different, and it was a thing of beauty. And I remember just thinking like, wow, this is great. And then after a couple of hundred 155 rounds inside of a Paladin, I was ready for something different. I was ready to get out of the Paladin and start moving around and doing something different. But to answer the original question, was it everything I thought it could be based off of the video? Yes.
Okay, so you go off to Korea and you're in a Paladin. Describe for the audience what a Paladin is and how it operates.
So everybody thinks Paladin is basically a tank. Um, it's a self-propelled howitzer. Um, so it looks similar to a tank, but it's a howitzer. Um, it's basically a big freezer. It it can reach out and touch somebody. Has three people inside. Your chief has digital operations, degraded operations, 155 rounds. Your your believe it or not, your driver is extremely important to the operation because he is the one who is making sure that the hydraulics have the pressure to be able to elevate and depress. And the number one man is more important than the gunner in my eyes on the Paladin, simply because the chief is doing 90% of the work because everything is digital, and the number one man is making sure that everything else is done. The gunner is just making sure that the powder is going in behind the round, and from there, chief verifies everything, send it. And it's that simple. And they just do it over and over and over. And as long as the target keeps getting hit, they just keep sending it. It's a simple process in a Paladin.
One of the most important things about being on a gun crew is to know that it's always the fire direction center's fault or the fire support officer and the forward observers. It's shared fault between them. It's never your fault.
But the other thing that's important to know is if you ever hear check firing, rear of the piece, face the piece, fall in, just know don't touch anything, and things just went south.
It's the FTC's fault.
It's the FTC's fault.
I say with love, of course.
It has to be the FTC's fault.
Okay, so was you were in the in the music playing with some pretty big bands before you joined the service. So had you ever, when you went to Korea, had you ever been out of the country before?
Not with the bands, no.
Okay, so but I mean, so Korea was like your first time leaving the U.S.
I take that back. With Jackknife, we accidentally went out of the country, but Korea was the first time going outside the country. Yes.
Well, I mean,
Korea,
accidentally
Korea
winding up in Canada is not really a big deal. I don't really call that leaving the country. So,
yeah. Well, Korea was the first time. Yes.
how was that experience? I mean, how was that experience for you?
Going to Korea.
Yeah. Did you immerse
That
yourself in the culture?
no, I didn't. Um, so the flight was brutal. So I'm from South Louisiana. The first time I went to New Orleans was when I was 21. Um, my best friend Audie Petrie was getting ready to leave to go on tour with his band. So he wasn't going to be able to be my best man in my wedding. So he took me to New Orleans uh, for my bachelor party. So that was the first time I had left the bayou to actually go to New Orleans. So that was the first time I had actually like going that far north in Louisiana. So when I tell you I'm from the bayou, like my friends talk like they're from the bayou. So my friend Scott Leger, love him to death. He speaks, uh, he speaks like a Cajun, uh, very
It's like some
much like a
serious
Cajun.
Creole Cajun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he is very much Creole Cajun. Um, so for me to get on a plane and go like 16 hours to Korea was just like crazy. Like for me to go on a plane to Oklahoma was just mind blowing, but to turn around and go to Korea, unreal. Um, I was actually um, I was actually uh, talking with a very close friend the other day, and we were talking about a layover that I had, and it was in China of all places. And I don't know how long the layover was, but all I know is it like I kept falling asleep, and these two Chinese girls got on the same row that I was on, and like they got on, and as soon as they got on, like they fell asleep. And the next thing I know, like I was asleep, and like all three of us were like had our heads on each other's shoulders. And thankfully, I woke up first because I was just like, no, this isn't happening. Um, but yeah,
China.
yeah, yeah, it was a bad could have been a bad situation, but I know that I used my mom's twist and turn technique for the rest of the way to South Korea, and I stayed awake. Um, but the ride was crazy. Um, my roommate when I got to Korea for the long haul was Castellan. Um, I didn't want to go out in Korea because everything that I saw of the culture in Korea I didn't agree with. Um, and I'm sure you guys probably know what I'm talking about as far as the culture outside of TDC and Tokari and Dongdashan and places like that.
I was gonna say, if you're in the Ville, there's a lot of nonsense going on downtown in the Ville. That, especially a married gentleman, in his 30s, doesn't need to be messing with that stuff. So yeah, I got.
I was single when I joined, so that wasn't the issue. But I just didn't agree with any of that stuff, so I didn't want to be a part of it. Um, so when I was on my bus ride from Incheon to Camp Hovey, there was a staff sergeant who was on the bus, and he probably gave me some of the best career information that anybody could have given me. And he said, "Has anybody talked to you about correspondence courses?" And I said, "No, I have no idea what that is." And he said, "When you get to your unit and you meet your platoon sergeant, tell him that you want to sign up for correspondence courses. He'll know what I'm talking about." And I said, "Okay." So I did exactly that when I met Smoke Smith. he was doing his initial counseling, and I said, "Smoke, I'd like to sign up for correspondence courses." And he said, "Is that a fact?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay." So on my initial counseling, it said, "You will have 25 correspondence courses completed at the end of every month." So, by the time I left Korea, I was maxed out on correspondence courses. And as y'all know, back in the day, if you were maxed out on correspondence courses, that was big ticket money when you got, when you went for promotion points.
That's boards, yeah.
Yeah. So when I went for, for specialist to sergeant, that was, you know, that was a big hurdle. I didn't have to worry about crossing.
So you actually made rank in Korea, unlike most people who actually lose rank in Korea. So good for you.
Yeah, I left as a PFC.
So you were there for a year.
I was.
Where did you have the option to stay longer?
I did.
And you said no, thank you.
No, so I had one of my best friends is actually he's actually here at Fort Sill. He actually became my very first section chief after um, Chief Cole left, who was Sergeant Matz, and Sergeant Matz. We like over the time that he got to know me, he told me straight up. He said, "You don't belong in a paladin." He's like, "You're you're the wrong caliber of guy for a paladin." He's like, "You need to be on a light piece." He's like, where do you want to go?" And I can tell you wholeheartedly, like, I would sit in my room when I wasn't in the gym. I would sit in my room and watch Band of Brothers like religiously, and like I I built my whole career. Uh, I built my whole career based off of leadership at the point of the bayonet, which is the 10 principles of Major Dick Winters. And like for anybody who doesn't know that, if you Google leadership at the point of the bayonet, if you're a new soldier and you Google that, you cannot go wrong. I promise you, you can't. If you build your career around that and you follow it, like I guarantee you, no matter if you're light artillery, heavy artillery, infantry, cav, whatever, it doesn't matter. You will find yourself a better leader and you will become a better soldier. And Sergeant Matz, um, he helped point me in the right direction and got me over to the career counselor in Korea. They did a extension for me to get me over to the 101st, and because I was originally supposed to PCS and go to um, Fort Riley, Kansas, and we did the extension, got me over to Fort Campbell, and the rest is history.
You did air assault school en route?
I did not. I didn't get to do. I didn't get to do air assault school until we got back from Afghanistan.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I don't want to jump too far ahead then.
So you go from Korea back to the States. You wind up at the 101st, which is where you wanted to go. Was readjusting after a year in Korea difficult, or did you kiss the ground as soon as you got off the plane?
Readjusting wasn't hard at all. Um, I got to Fort Campbell. I met this guy who I'm still friends with to this day. One of my best friends. His name's Mike Daniels. At the time, he was a specialist. Went up to him and said, "Hey, where's the gym?" And he pointed me in the way of the gym, and I was reacclimated.
There you
That's
go.
how that's how easy it was. Because for me, life in Korea was as simple as going to the gym, going to my room, going to chow, going to the gym. and it was that simple. I was away from family, so there was no different. I didn't have any friends other than Monty. In Korea, I had Castion PCS, and went to Fort Riley, but it was just a matter of meeting my new unit and getting started. But other than that, um, there was no really no lag time.
So the 101st is a light infantry division. So as an artilleryman, you're off the Paladins now, and you're in towed artillery world. So something small that could be pulled by a Humvee. It's a 119er, which is a 105 millimeter howitzer. So you are at PFC at this point. Is that what you said?
I am PFC.
So what position are you on the crew basically when you show up as a brand new E3 from Korea?
So I show up uh, from Korea, and before I have a chance to even finish in processing, I'm told, pack your bags. Uh, your unit is in the field. Sergeant Major's coming to pick you up. And on top
Welcome
of
to 18th
that,
Airborne Corps. Yeah.
welcome to the 18th Airborne Corps. On top of that, it was my birthday. So I was like, happy birthday. So
I have a very similar experience to that, but it wasn't my birthday.
me and like, I want to say three other guys that showed up together, a staff sergeant, me, and I think two other guys. Sergeant Major showed up. He was in all his kit. Showed up, and he said, first questions that I remember him asking, as he went up to the staff sergeant, and he said, "What's your PT score?" And the staff sergeant said like 240 or something like that. And then he said, "Did you try?" And and
Brutal.
the staff sergeant kind of like chuckled, and he said, "Did I say something funny?" And the staff sergeant said, "No, Sergeant Major." And he said, "Then put away your smile." He came to me, and then he said, "What did you score in your last PT test?" And I said, 280 something, Sergeant Major. And he said, "Aren't you the guy with the bum knee?" And I said, "Yes, I am, Sergeant Major." And he said, "Okay." And then he went to the next guy, and then he said something like, "What was your score?" And the guy was like 218 or something. And then he said, "Did you take all three events?"
I like this guy already. That's
I remember just standing there, just trying so hard not to laugh. And 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 the guy chuckled, and Sergeant Major said, "Do I look like a damn comedian to you?"
oh, he did the Joe Pesci. Oh man, am I some sort of clown here to amuse you?
And and Sergeant Major, and he said, the guy said, "No, Sergeant Major." And he said, "You know what? Y'all all load up your shit and get in my truck." So we all got in the truck, and we went out to the field. And we got to the field, and I was expecting to see howitzers. However, when we got to the field, I didn't see howitzers because the unit was preparing for Iraq to be provisional infantry. So once again, there were no howitzers.
Yeah, my first artillery battalion, we did something similar. We called them the spoon platoon. So we took all the artillery batteries and trained them up, but we also are enablers. So the cooks would I don't even think we out MTO wise, you probably know better than me. I don't know if we still have all the cooks and all that, but we took all the maintainers and the cooks and everything, and and trained them up as a provisional infantry platoon and called them the spoon platoon.
Yeah, we used our So in Afghanistan, we had HHB, who became Havoc Battery, and Havoc was a hodgepodge of everything. Um, so Lieutenant Todd Weaver was infantry. Lieutenant Kinzel would have been infantry. Um, Sergeant Casey was a 13 Delta at the time. Um, we had um, Sergeant Nakan, who was I want to say radar. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that.
The
Something like that.
Radio
radio.
systems operator.
I don't think that's what he was. He would. I don't remember exactly what he was, but he was something outside of everything else that everybody did. And then we had
We used to have the whiskeys, the weather, the meteorological.
so so Sergeant Lyon. Uh, he received the Silver Star, and he was a weatherman.
Yep.
So that just goes to show. Like we had literally every MOS that you could think of in our Havoc element.
The island of misfit toys.
So where were you in Iraq?
We were at Camp Victory, but
Okay.
we were patrolling off of Route Steelers, and we were in Abu Ghraib.
Okay, real quick, just for context, what year is this now? Because you came in 2006. You spent, you did you did your OSET training and everything. You went to Korea for a year.
I got to um, the 101st in May of 2007. They deployed to Iraq in, I believe, October of 2007.
Okay.
I had ACL surgery in the end of October and met them in February of 2008.
You and I would have been in Iraq at the same time. I mean, I was in the 82nd, way down south, but yeah, yep, good times.
Yeah, I was there from February 2008 until I believe we came back around November
Yeah, because those were the
2008.
15-monthers back then.
Yes.
So what was your unit's mission there?
So we were the whole Iraq mission was definitely a coin mission. We
Counterinsurgency.
so we patrolled route stealers. We were out there winning hearts and minds. We were trying to help them with the infrastructure. We were trying to build up um, just just everything that they had, and try and give them something back from what the whole war had taken from them. I can remember sometimes we'd go out there. We would do 2 patrols a day, and we would be out there for like 6 hours a day. Like one patrol would be 6 hours, and then we'd be back for 6 hours, and then we'd go back out for another 6 hours. Um, we would bring just truckloads, like log packs of water, to these people. We would do vet techs. I don't know if you guys have heard of those, but we had like Iraqis that had come to the United States, got their vet license. We would bring them out to the local populace, and they would treat all of their animals. Like we had videos. They're probably still on YouTube somewhere. We had videos of our soldiers, no shit, like wrangling cows, so they could, give them shots. We have like Sergeant Pullman.
Operation Goat Rodeo. Yes.
Yeah, like I remember Sergeant Pullman grabbing this bull by the horns, tackling it to the ground so they could give him a shot, and then him letting it go is madness. Madness.
The veterinary stuff is very important, particularly, I mean, of course, depending on where you are, but if you're in a very rural agricultural area where these people get their subsistence from their animals, that is critically important, especially if you are attempting to sway this population to be either pro your team or, neutral.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a very strong capability. So you would have been
Yeah.
working probably with some civil affairs folks. We can talk
Yeah.
offline about that later, but
Yeah. I have no doubt that there was a lot of uh, there was probably a lot of other entities working within the same region that we were working, and we were just the muscle behind the big picture of the whole scheme of the maneuver.
so did you enjoy doing we'll say maneuver? Did you enjoy doing a maneuver type mission, which was, what you trained up for during your pre-mission training, but still kind of outside of a traditional artillery type mission set? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I didn't have any problems with it. The guys that we deployed with in Iraq, those guys hands down were my family. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I would live and die for each and every one of those guys. Most of those guys came to Afghanistan with me. A couple of them left. A couple of them became well-known names in other units. Do you remember the name Sergeant Jamie Jarbo from 10th
Jarbo, that
Mountain?
sounds, yeah,
So Sergeant Jamie Jarbo lived pretty much to the day. He was shot uh, through his throat, but he was like the guy was a warrior. Truly was a warrior.
sounds
But
familiar.
he like I remember when he was with us. I remember chasing him every PT test, and for some reason he was just always faster than me. He was shorter than me, but he was always faster than me. And like if nothing else, he paced me to be faster. But Jamie was he was a really good guy that was with us in Iraq. Sergeant Michael Kerspel, he was another guy, and Sergeant Michael Kerspel went with 10th Mountain as well. And Sergeant Michael Kerspel, he was killed by an IED. But Michael he was phenomenal with when he was with us. But he was another one of our guys, and we actually have a picture of Sergeant Michael Kerspel, Sergeant Patrick Durham, and Sergeant Kyle Stout. Like when Kyle Stout was reenlisting in Iraq, they were all privates, and like they're all in one picture. Just Kyle is reenlisting, and Durham and Kerspel are holding his flag. But
Yeah, that's
yeah, like
powerful. Yeah.
yeah, like the guys in that unit in Iraq, like I can't say enough about those guys.
People who've never been in a frontline unit and deployed together and gone through the daily grind, because deployments are I mean, obviously there's punctuated by moments of terror and combat and fighting, but most deployments like that, it's a grind, and it's more of a marathon than anything else. And
Yeah,
the relationships that you build during that period, I mean, you just can't replicate that anywhere else in any other profession. I mean, I'm sure maybe there's some police and firemen that maybe come close, but you just can't replicate that.
I think the thing that goes unsaid though is like although there's all these moments of chaos and craziness and madness that happens, there's so many bonding moments that we all laugh, and it's the silliness
Dumb
and
stuff. Yeah.
just absolute madness that goes on behind the scenes that people do, and that's the stuff that like people just can't understand because like
Yeah.
the dark humor that soldiers live by that civilians just can't understand, like it's that stuff that truly makes us like one big dysfunctional family.
Bunch of weirdos. It's true though, yeah.
It's true.
Bunch of weirdos
It's true.
is perfect.
Okay. So because you were recovering from your ACL surgery, you did not deploy with the unit, but uh, so you ended up being there just under a year.
Yeah, I was there for like 10 months.
So even though you weren't there when they started that mission, that sort of coin security mission there, you did get to see it through to the end. Would you say that?
Yes.
Would you say that at least your unit and your unit's mission, you guys were successful in accomplishing, the task you had ahead of you, or that you were given?
Yes. I think what we were tasked to do, I believe that my brigade went out there and we did what we were asked to do. Um, my battalion went out, we did our job. Um, it's that simple. Like you're given a mission, and no matter whether or not you like the mission or you don't like the mission, you go out there and you execute it to the best of your ability. And at the end of the day, you come home, and all you can do is hold your head up high and keep marching forward. That's the best you can do.
Okay, so you guys redeployed in, did you say May of 2008
Well, it would have been fall of '08. Yeah.
or fall of 08?
Yes.
Is that about right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll pick it up from there in just a minute, but let's go ahead and take a break. Okay, so you're back stateside now, and you're at closing in on 3 years. Was it was it getting close to reenlistment time?
So I had re-enlisted in Iraq.
Good move. Good move.
Yeah, that whole non-taxable re-enlistment is pretty nice
That's how they get you.
when you're in Iraq. So yeah, I had re-enlisted there.
How big was that bonus?
16.
Solid, solid.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
How long did you reenlist for?
Um, it was it was like I want to say 3 years, 3 or 4 years, something like that. The standard reenlistment back then.
Okay, so that would have put you then to about 6 years before you could reenlist again. At at this point, because obviously you were enjoying it, enjoying the army, enjoying the artillery life.
Yeah,
Did you
yeah.
were
Well,
you already starting to think about maybe you could do a full 20, or was that not even on your horizon yet?
not even not even a blimp on the radar.
Just enjoying it day to day, huh?
Yes.
I think that was most of us, to be honest.
So getting back from the deployment, the hail the conquering hero fanfare, dies down after a few months, and you're really starting to readjust to life back in a safer area, shall we say? Was that difficult?
So when we first got home, um, I had actually, like most, had my green book uh, that I kept with me throughout the deployment in Iraq, and did like most people and just kind of like called some old friends, followed up with whoever just to let them know, hey, we're going to be coming back pretty soon. just to touch base. Um, so one of those friends uh, ended up being, we'll say, a love connection turned long-term love connection. So when we first got home, the the reintegration was was pretty easy because it was a matter of just hanging out with her because I got to hang out with my family. That was easy. I didn't have anybody asking any questions. Got to go to the gym for free. That was pretty standard data. Got to hang out with her. Got to hang out with my family. Got to go to the gym. I mean, life was pretty good.
It's a simple
And
life,
then,
yes.
yeah, it was pretty good. And then, you know, we got back to artillery training.
And this time you actually had artillery pieces.
This time we actually had artillery training, and this was before the Alpha threes. This was still with the Alpha twos.
Okay. So it is fairly standard when units, redeploy back home that they will break off and, you know, people get promoted, people get new assignments. They go to new duty stations, they get out of the service, whatever the case is. How much did that turnover affect um, the guys that you deployed with?
So the the guys that I mentioned earlier, Kerspel, Jarbo, those were two of the guys that I remember. Um, we had a guy named Cantor that left us, but for the most part, a lot of our guys that was with me stayed with me because when I got there, if you remember, like I was a PFC, so like I grew up in the 101st. So the same guys that grew up with me kind of stayed there. The guys that were staff sergeants pretty much pushed out. They either ETS'd or they PCS'd or went off and became drill sergeants or whatever they became. However, most of our sergeants were fenced in and they stayed. So most of them didn't leave. We had Sergeant Ryan McCorkill, he stayed with us. We had Sergeant Torres, he stayed. So for the most part, our core group of guys stayed with us. So like our turnover wasn't real drastic.
That's good. It's good. Definitely good for unit cohesion.
When did you receive the warning order? This by you, I mean your unit. When did you receive the warning order for your next deployment?
I would say we probably got it. If I had to guess, I would say probably sometime around maybe December or January. I would say it was that far out. Like we knew we were going to Afghanistan. Um,
But it was after you redeployed, though.
yes,
Okay, I ask
yeah,
because sometimes you get a warning order for a deployment while you're on a deployment, which which I know Dan and I both had that. So
no, no, it wasn't like that with this one.
okay, so what did they tell you you were going to be doing on said next deployment?
Artillery.
So let's talk about your train up, and then go ahead and jump into that next deployment here.
So we trained up through all of our artillery tables. So our guys were training through uh, just like we would normally train our artillery tables one through probably. I would assume that we probably made it up to probably artillery table 12. So you figure the basic. So our artillery table 1 through 5 is basically just your normal crew level certification stuff. So um, going and qualifying with your individual weapon, taking written tests, going out and um, doing your certification with your howitzer dry level would be your 5. 6 would be going out and shooting your tables uh, that are by the dot 8. Um, so which is your artillery dot 8, and then going out and doing your platoon level, which would be your table 12. But then probably somewhere around table 15 is where everything started to change, because that's when they started saying, well, some batteries are going to go as infantry, some platoons are going to still shoot. We're going to stand up Havoc battery, and they're going to go and do infantry mission, and it was real. So I'm going to tell you from a soldier perspective, because I can't tell you from, obviously I can't tell you from a higher perspective. I can only tell you from my perspective. From my perspective, from what I heard, it sounded like if you had written a bunch of hodgepodge on the back of a deck of cards and threw that crap up in the air, and whatever landed face up on the ground and people just started reading, that's what we were getting as far as information, because everybody had a different story every different day. And then the closer it came time for us to leave, or excuse me, the closer it came time for us to go to JRTC, the more things started to come into focus.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
like Bravo battery, you're going to go and you are going to be infantry. Um, but it was like, even knowing that we were going to be infantry, like the understanding of the terrain and things like that, we were just so ill prepared. Like no one had the foggiest idea of what we were getting ourselves into at that point in time. And I think even the hardest training that we could have done at Fort Campbell, because I can tell you, we put ourselves through some miserable training based off of like looking up the Arghandab River Valley, because we would Google the Arghandab River Valley and we would be like, wow, this looks pretty miserable. The grass looks really tall. It looks very wet. So we would go and we would go out and get in modified wedge formations, and we would patrol, and we would just do whatever we could to try and patrol. And no matter how much you patrol yourself in a flooded field with grass that's 4 foot tall, you can't prepare yourself for pomegranate orchards where they're flooded, and
Right.
that environment, you can't, when it's 116 degrees and everything is just encased and bullets are flying at you can't prepare for that.
Yeah. Now, did you find out that your battery was going to be tasked with infantry operations before you went to JRTC?
We found out about 30 days before.
You guys did some standalone training as best you could with what you knew.
We did.
When you went to JRTC, when you went to JRTC, were you was your battery conducting infantry operations there, or did they throw you back in the artillery role?
No, we did JRTC training. Like as a matter of fact, in the book, uh, there is direct quotes from now Lieutenant Colonel Smithson, from when he was a lieutenant. Some like best practices and things that he learned. There's direct quotes from him from what he wrote in his green book that are in Sons of the Arghandab from JRTC.
After JRTC, what was the turnaround before you got on the bird to go to Afghanistan?
It didn't seem very long. I, yeah, I couldn't honestly give you a true date, but it didn't seem long. I would say at most a month.
Yeah, it's usually block leave and then out the door. So
Yeah. Did you feel when you left? Did you and your peers feel comfortable with your training and what you were about to go do?
No.
That's fair.
yeah,
That's
I that's fair.
okay.
So
Now,
I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, did I think we were? Did I think we were in a position that we felt like we were sufficient enough to at least get us on ground and be able to survive until we could get our feet under us? I'll say yes. I think we've had enough confidence in ourselves that we felt that we could at least do that much. But um, going back to the book, when you read that first chapter, the death of innocence, like that chapter right there, like that chapter will take the air out of your lungs, and that's truly what happened to a lot of us. Like it took the air
yeah,
out of our lungs because that was like that was reality. It was like oh shit, like we are about to bring all of our guys into this. This is where it gets real right now.
it not only is it a rude awakening for the beginning, but the realization starts to set in that I mean we have months and months and months and months of this ahead of ourselves. That's that reality check that you're talking about.
Yeah, like like Chris Moon, like that guy, like he exemplified everything that I expect when I see a soldier that just like exudes perfection, and just like when you talk to him, he exudes confidence, and he just has that it. And then for things to happen the way they did for Chris, that was just such an enormous wake up call. I don't know if it was the same for everybody else. Once again, like some of these things I can only speak for myself. Like obviously I interviewed a lot of people for this book, but for some of these things I can only speak for myself. But for the patrol with Chris, it was such an enormous wake up call that I like that. Yeah, that guy will be with me for the rest of my life. Truly.
okay. Now, we don't want to give away too much of the book because we want people to go out and buy it and read the great things that you've written yourself, and it is remarkably well done. It really is. I have been impressed with all three of the Arghandab River Valley
Yes, you're
books.
the third in the trilogy.
Yes, but a couple of questions, little teasers. When you guys first got on the ground and you were doing your relief in place with the 82nd, you personally, what was your impression? Because you guys are coming in, you've just left JRTC, and these guys have been in this valley fighting for their lives for the last. I think they were there for about 6 months.
It wasn't a full year. I mean, yeah, months.
Yeah, no, they had been somewhere else first. But what was your first impression of those guys?
Um,
Whether it was their appearance, their demeanor, the way they carried themselves,
so
whatever. Just your first impression.
my first impression was Lord of the Flies.
Sir, that is America's division. No, I'm kidding.
You know, I was expecting to eventually see someone running around with like a Superman tattoo of like the 82nd on their chest. It was probably going to be Nollinger, but I can just see that. Just like that was going to be Nollinger. Like
We're
Lord
gonna
of the
have
Flies.
Dale on. We're gonna have Dale on, by the way. So he's
Yeah,
gonna be
you
able to
expected
defend
to see
himself.
somebody standing on top of
He, you know, he's
the quarters, like screaming, "I have the conch! I have the conch!"
Mhm.
I think Dale will probably agree, and he will probably
I
end
think he
up
would,
getting he'll probably end up getting an 82nd tattoo in the Superman logo.
just to spite you.
It won't even be to spite me; it'll be to as a tribute to the 82nd.
I'd be surprised if he didn't already have one. We love you, Dale. We'll bring you on, sir.
He probably does. He certainly probably has a two fury one. But all right, so you guys are in the Arghandab for how long?
Total,
Yeah.
Yes.
we got in the Arghandab in June and left in May, so we were there 11 months.
Now, after spending a year there and all the stuff that you guys went through, which is not pretty, but it's very well detailed in the book. When you guys finally left the valley, and I mean, you guys are getting ready to come home, but you are actually physically like nowhere near the valley anymore. You personally, what were some of the things that you were thinking about?
When we when we were in Kandahar,
Yeah, I mean, was there like an overwhelming sense of relief that you had made it out of there intact? I mean, were you just looking forward to coming back to the good old U.S. of A?
and that's a tough question. So I can tell you that there were two separate instances that I can give you information on. One instance was when Sergeant Kerry Howard and I went on leave. Uh, we went on leave and we had a colonel come up to us and tell us that our uniforms were unserviceable to fly home in.
You're talking
Um,
about your mid tour leave.
yes, but we didn't go home until mid tour until like it was late in the tour. So like
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
got there we
Been
got
there.
there in
Yeah.
June and we didn't I don't remember when exactly it was, but it was late before we went home and like our best uniform was like it wasn't good. but it was the best we had, and that was our answer to him. We were like, "Sir, we're coming from the Arghandab. This is the best we have." Um, and I just remember thinking, like, some of these people are so out of touch with reality that they don't know what goes is going on the other side of this mountain. Um, which brings me to the answer to your original question. When we left and we got to Kandahar and we were in our sleeping quarters and just looking around and seeing how different life was from right there at Calf to right across the mountain in the Arghandab River Valley. I remember thinking that it was almost like it wasn't real. Like the whole last year wasn't real, and like I'm not gonna use the words because y'all asked me not to, but um, I will I'll refer back to William Yeski. Damn that valley!
Yeah.
Like
Has that surreal quality, if you can.
because
Surreal.
I remember leaving in the middle of the night and going walk on the boardwalk when I knew that there would be hardly nobody there, just so there would be like just so there would be silence, just so I could hear the wood underneath my feet instead of hearing like just the sand. And it's just completely different world. Like it wasn't real. So yeah, it was very different.
Okay, so that's kind of a good segue into the next thing. So you read a let's jump forward to redeployment. Now you're back stateside again. So let's take that a step further. You're talking about how surreal things felt after you left the valley and you were in Kandahar. Now let's take that a step further and talk about your, being back home. What happens now? How can you possibly adjust?
So we got home, and so the adjustment period when we got home was non-existent. Um, so when we first hit ground and we were going through reverse SRP, there were certain stations going through reverse SRP where people talked to us and talked to us specifically about whether or not we were next to IEDs, whether we were inside of vehicles that had exploded, um, if we had seen dead bodies, if we had seen traumatic things such as that, anything basically related to post-traumatic stress. And basically, we were spoon-fed the answers to those things, and we were told certain answers to give in relation to that. So, trying to reacclimate when you are being spoon-fed answers to things like that is really, really hard. Um, if you look at the statistics of the suicide rate of the 101st when we came back in 2011, you'll notice that the suicide rate is the highest or one of the highest in the Army from that year. So I would say our reacclimatization from that year was pretty terrible. When you're driving around post and all you see is these signs that say "Welcome home, heroes," but like you don't really feel it. Like you don't really feel like a hero. Um, like it's hard. It's really hard to adjust to that. Um, and I'm sure that there's a lot of other people that feel that way too.
Oh, there certainly are.
So reacclimating to situations like that are very difficult, and the guys from the 101st, not just Second Brigade, um, but the 101st in general, uh, found it extremely hard to reacclimate when we came home.
It can be hard to see yourself as a hero. That word that gets used often when you, and I think the three of us have probably experienced this, when you think back to your experience and realize that for the most part, like we were mostly just trying to stay alive and our keep our friends to our left and our right alive.
Yeah,
When you hear the word hero, you think of this grandiose thing because that's the imagery that most people have, and it can be much more basic than that.
How long how long do you think that it took for you once you got back? How long do you think it took for you personally to start noticing that you were adjusting to life back in the States? Because I mean, it's little things that happen first, right? Like you start you don't smell you don't smell the moon dust anymore. The fast food or whatever home cooked meals or whatever they're no longer passing through your system almost as soon as you eat it anymore. You know, uh,
You're not drinking 5 Rip-Its a day. Yeah.
yeah, the little things start happening first. But when was it that you first started noticing you were that you were adjusting?
Dan, I'll be honest. It probably took several years, and that's an honest answer. Because not long after we came home, I left to become a drill sergeant. Um, and like my tempo never stopped.
Yeah,
So because my tempo never stopped, it was like it was like on like my RPMs were always maxed out.
you went from a high op tempo combat environment to a very high op tempo training environment. That
Yeah.
I mean, it's called a cycle for a reason, right?
Yeah, so it was very hard. Um, yeah, it was very hard to slow down, and yeah, so it took a couple of years.
In retrospect, you say a couple of years, and I mean, that's certainly the same for me. Dan can speak for himself. When you had the gift of retrospect, were you able to identify some of your behaviors, or thoughts, or feelings, or emotions way after the fact and say, "Oh, yeah, that was definitely me trying to process, grief, trauma, etc. But it was years after the fact, and you're like, oh, that's why I did that.
I think part of the processing came back to me when I sat down with John Nuckham. John and I were assigned to Korea together. We deployed to Iraq together. We deployed to Afghanistan together. And then John um, ended up getting out of the Army. I think he med boarded out of the Army when we got back from Afghanistan. And he and I sat down, and I think like everything came into focus one day during a conversation that he and I had. And a lot of times I feel like it's when you sit down with somebody who understands you that can like help you to zero your targets.
Yep.
Like
I agree.
like other than that, you're just shooting blind. And
Yep.
like for so long, I had just been just like squeezing the trigger and not even knowing where my targets were. And until I sat down with John and he helped me to be able to like zero in on what I was shooting at again. Um, like
That totally makes sense.
I was just kind of like going shooting off of the hip for a long time. So
Yeah, it's hard to share or relate some of the processes that you're going through, mentally or spiritually, to people who have no idea what you're talking about, and not just in the civilian world, but even also in the military world. Um, I had deployed 4 times, and I was still running into people who hadn't deployed once. And how could they possibly understand the things that I was supposed to be able to talk to them about? The things
These are
that they said they
presumably people
wanted.
that should understand, right?
Yeah, like
yeah,
how could you possibly understand what you want me to talk to you about when you have no idea what it is? And so having even just that one person with that shared experience that you can sit down and have a cup of coffee with, have a beer with, have dinner with, and just kind of talk through some things, that is infinitely better.
no doubt.
Yeah.
So tell us about the trail. Life on the trail.
So trail. Um, when I became a drill sergeant in basic training, I I 100% wanted to make a soldier. Didn't matter if it was a soft skill MOS or if it was an infantry soldier that could go out on the battlefield and perform as a infantry soldier. Bottom line, didn't matter what happened. Didn't matter what would happen. And the reason was because what I had seen in Afghanistan. I wanted to be able to see that same soldier that got thrown into a havoc battery be able to go out there and survive. So I would work feverishly, tirelessly, and I would push them as hard as humanly possible as a drill sergeant. It didn't matter if I was coming off of staff duty or sorry CQ because in our world the female drill sergeants pulled staff duty, males pulled CQ. So if I pulled CQ and we had the fit to win course the next day, didn't matter. I ran fit to win with my guys. If we had the rappel tower, I ran the rappel tower with my guys. Didn't matter. I didn't care. Didn't matter. Like if my guys were doing a big event, I was doing the big event with my guys. I didn't care. Um, I was told we weren't supposed to take candy away from my soldiers. Took candy away from my soldiers, 100%. Like, took the candy away from my soldiers and put it in one of those mesh trash cans, and I would put it at the entryway of my office. I didn't take the candy away from my privates. Just for clarification, my PG took the candy away from my soldiers, and the trash can would go at my doorway. It was understood that when my platoon would win high PT, they could get the trash can and they could have a free for all. They could eat
Make it
themselves.
disappear.
They could eat themselves sick, and then they could have a pizza party afterwards, and they could eat themselves sick, and it worked every cycle. So I believed that if you invested in your soldiers would invest in you, just like in a regular line unit. Invest in your soldiers, and your soldiers will invest in you. Um, I had this. I had this stupid post that went like viral a while back. It was this soldier that I had in basic training. I ran into him at the gym, and he came up to me and was talking to me, and he said he was getting out of the army, and I asked him why, and he said because when he was in the field, his wife went into labor, and his unit wouldn't let him leave the field to go and see his baby being born. And I was just thinking, like how do we fail like that as leaders? How do we fail like that? That's like unforgivable, right? So I made a post about it, and at the very end of the post, it said, "Passionate leaders breed passionate followers who turn into passionate leaders," and it's reality.
That's well said. Yeah.
And like that exact reason was why I pushed so hard while I was on the trail. And like I loved being a drill sergeant. I don't regret being a drill sergeant whatsoever. And it's the reason why I went and became a drill sergeant leader, because I wanted to make better drill sergeants. And I wanted to see good quality drill sergeants on the trail. That's simple.
I'm looking at Dan's face right now. I'm trying to figure it out.
Where did you pull your duty?
Fort Jackson, Echo 313.
Relaxing Jackson.
Oh, there it is.
No,
So
I agree with you
it
though. I agree with
it
you
was it
about
was it
investing in
was
your soldiers.
100% relaxing Jackson. However, it's only relaxing Jackson if your drill sergeants allow it to be relaxing Jackson. Otherwise, if they want it to be something otherwise, they're going to train you to the standard.
What color was your guide on?
Usually taped up, but um, I'll be perfectly honest, I don't even remember.
Every basic training guide on is blue
It's supposed to be blue. Yeah, yeah.
because every soldier is a trigger puller first, whether they signed up to be a dental tech or a weatherman. They're all infantrymen first.
Couldn't couldn't tell you. I would assume that that's correct because everybody is, you know, it's Eco 313 infantry. So yeah, that makes sense.
I have known other drills, and they were training MPs, or they were training cooks or what have you, and they did not focus on those basic fundamentals of being a soldier. And I think you did those young soldiers a world of good by preparing them for the cold reality that, hey, you could wind up in the spoon platoon too.
Yeah, I feel like, so I kind of always had the mentality of, like, you know how in the Marine Corps you're a rifleman first.
So they say.
That's kind of, well, that's kind of what I've always heard. So that's kind of the way I kind of thought about our soldiers. Like you never hear like you're an infantryman first. However, they all come in as like you said, in an infantry company, but you never hear you're an infantryman first. So you come in as whatever MOS is. So
I think back to Will Yeski when we did his episode, and he wrote about it in his book as well. Some drill sergeants that really stood out in his memory when he was going through basic training, and how at the time he thought these guys were warlords, and how could they possibly do all this to us? Flash forward to the Arghandab, and how grateful he was that he had NCOs like that who trained him harshly to prepare him for the brutal realities of what he was dealing with. And so my question to you is, did you ever have any soldiers circle back to you months, years later and thank you directly for that TLC you gave them while they were in basic?
yeah, I have actually had one that was at my promotion ceremony to first sergeant.
Nice.
I came to my promotion ceremony. Took a picture with me with a full beard, uh, which I thought was great. Um,
Nice.
um, yeah, I've had quite a few. I had one of them that he was a linguist, and he was always attached to group, so I kept trying to get him to go and get his green beret, and he kept telling me why, like why would
It's
I
a lot
do
of
that?
walking. Yeah.
So he got into doing soft elite. So he does that quite a bit, and he just graduated, and he is now a PA.
Nice.
So yeah, so I'm really proud of him. So he is now a PA, and there's quite a few of my former soldiers that I see that send me messages and tell me thank you for being a hard ass against them, or actually like taking them one on one and teaching them and mentoring to them. That kind of stuff means a lot. I had one specific soldier who played for the Indianapolis Colts, which I thought was really really unique. And when he left, he pulled me aside and told me thank you for being a father figure to him, and I thought that was a pretty enormous compliment.
All right. Before we move past your drill sergeant duty, you of course have to share with us at least one good story about the some of the wildest or craziest or most mind blowing nonsense that you saw as a drill sergeant.
Mind blowing nonsense. That's the
Trainees
tagline.
trainees get into all sorts of nonsense. So I'll leave it up to you. Give us one good one.
Man, there's so many.
I know. I'm only asking for one.
um, so I'm going to tell you one that I was proud of.
Okay.
Um, Proud of because he completely broke the rules. Um, so I asked this kid. So first off, at the beginning of basic training, like this kid, once upon a time, I wasn't old and decrepit and broken and
Nobody believes that, Joe. Nobody believes that.
the way I am now. Um, and I used to be a gym rat, like next level. And I used to leave and like I would march the soldiers to chow, leave chow, go to the gym, work out, do a blitz workout, come back, and then by that point I was, you know, pumped up full of pre-workout. I would march the soldiers back to the bay, and then they would get a smoke session because I was full of pre-workout, and then we would continue training. Anyways, I had this one soldier. I couldn't even tell you his name. But anyways, this soldier was like, drill sergeant, like, what do you use? Um, what do you use to get like as big as you are? And I said, soldier, I'll be honest with you. Like, I just take pre-workout. I eat a lot of peanut butter and beef jerky and, protein, and that's it.
Protein and rage.
And that's it. So we went through the whole cycle, and at the very end of the cycle, I would always give my soldiers one free shot. So like they were able to like ask me, tell me whatever, like tell me what you did that would get you in trouble, that you got away with, and I promise there's no repercussion, no nothing. Graduate
Amnesty.
tomorrow. Amnesty. You're good. So this one soldier said, drill sergeant, uh, you notice how I always got a package once a week? And I said, yes. And he said, did you notice how I always got um, a big and a little pack of the Jergens foot powder? And I said, yes. And he said, I had my mom clean it out and put protein in there so I could have protein shakes throughout my time here at basic training. So that was one of the good ones that I
We
had.
we call that soft logistics. Yes.
So he might have been a supply guy. I don't know. All I know is he found a way around, and that was his way around.
Bravo.
That is probably the tamest thing that I have heard of soldiers getting smuggled into them.
So I can give you another one that's pretty quick if you want one.
Sure.
Your call.
Let her
Okay.
rip. Let's hear it.
Sure. I mean,
All right.
I'm just saying, soldiers, the trainees
All right,
will try to have just about everything legal or illegal sent to them in basic training.
Granted.
Protein powder
All right.
is
Yeah,
very, very
it's legal.
tame.
Yeah, it's legal. Illegal in basic training. All right, so next one. So I'm on CQ, sitting there, eating my dinner, get a knock on the door. This soldier comes over and says, drill sergeant, I just need to let you know that there is soldiers breaking into your office at night, and they're stealing their cell phones out of your office, and they're using their cell phones. They're breaking in through the ceiling tiles, and then at night they break back in and they put their phones back in.
I'm picturing Mission Impossible, like Ethan Hunt coming down through the ceiling. Yeah.
And I was like, really? And so I said, how many? And he said, 3. And I said, awesome. I said, go back to the bay. I'll be in there in about 10 minutes. So he goes back to the bay. I go back in the bay in about 10 minutes. And I said, everybody around the kill zone right now. So I walk in and I said, all right, soldiers, here's the deal. I know for a fact there are 10 of you that are breaking into my office in the middle of the night and stealing your cell phones and making phone calls. So, with that being said, you have 30 seconds to fess up. All 10 of you, or the whole platoon, is getting Article 15s, and you're all getting held over. So I want to see 10 people standing right here, right now. And I pulled out my watch and I clicked it. And everybody started yelling at each other, and they were like, somebody better fess up. And they started blah, blah, blah. And there was only supposed to be 3. But in 30 seconds, there was 10 people standing in my kill zone. And I said, "Go get me your cell phones." And they went. They got their cell phones, and I was like, "All right, go to the office." They broke out their cell phones, and I said, "Go to your last call." And sure enough, all 10 of them last call. That was the wildest one.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I have used that similar tactic of overplaying the hand, but not for cell phones. That wasn't ever an issue. That's certain. Not for me anyway. But all right. So being a drill sergeant is an exhausting duty. It takes a lot out of you. Did you know where you wanted to go next?
I 100% knew where I wanted to go next. Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I wanted to go back to the 101st.
And we will dig into that. But let's go ahead and take another break. So your time as a drill sergeant has come to an end, and you want to go back to Fort Campbell. That's your dream. Does it happen?
It does. I go back to 3rd Brigade, 320th, as a gunnery sergeant. My first sergeant is First Sergeant Monsanto. And I got there, unfortunately, having been off of the line for a considerable amount of time. And my last duty position was a section chief. I really had no time as a gunnery sergeant. So I went there, and I felt like I was running with my pants on fire, pretty much.
I saw a lot of this too with artillery guys who spent years not doing artillery missions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so presumably, let's see. The Devardis hadn't returned during this time. The Devardis existed, and then they went away, and then they came back. But you went back before the Devardis came back. Am I accurate on that?
Yeah, that's correct. Dvordy came back probably about, I think it was like about a year after I got back, something around there.
The reason why I bring that up, that's significant, just because the Vardis generally were responsible for the train up of the artillery battalions in their respective divisions. And when the Devardis went away, the training slipped just because that standard bearer went away. And so you kind of showed up during that lag. So what was that like, trying to get reblued on your core artillery tasks?
The biggest issue was you had people that were for lack of a better word, that were like fighting for jobs. Um, so you had people that were coming back from recruiting, people coming from drill. You had other people that were um, senior chiefs that wanted that gunnery sergeant job. So you had like it was very cutthroat. So nobody wanted to help. Um, so it didn't matter who you were, who you thought you were. Um, like your first sergeant said, "Hey, this guy's going to be our gunnery sergeant," and a lot of times you came in, and if your platoon sergeant wasn't invested in you, you were flapping in the wind. So like without somebody to help you, you better be real good at the time with the 650.
Yeah.
Now we
A
have the dot
breakdown
50.
a breakdown in the mentorship chain.
Um, yeah, like back you know how it is. Back then, it was kind of like you're an NCO, figure it out.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's basically what it amounted to, especially in the artillery world. You know, you're an NCO, you know what the manual is, figure it out. Um, so, you know, I guess I guess if I had a circle to carry around with me as a drill sergeant, I would have been able to do that. I guess maybe if I was at Fort Sill as a drill sergeant, it would have been a little bit easier because I could have went over to AIT land and practiced with an aiming circle and came prepared. However, I was at Fort Jackson and I did not have those tools, so I came and I was ill prepared, and I came and I looked like a fool.
Yeah, as a junior artilleryman, we used to always say that the artillery eats its own. That was the culture where I was at. Sounds to me like that's pretty similar to what you experienced.
Yeah. The the benefit I had, thankfully, is whenever I got to Alpha Battery, um, the guys that I was with, they knew that I was humble enough to admit, like, hey, like I don't know, um, like everything that I'm doing. Like I'm trying to learn. Like I'm learning on the fly right now. Like the first thing that I did as a gunnery sergeant was a battery air assault, and I had the battalion commander with us on the air assault. So it was like if like as if
No
there wasn't
pressure.
enough pressure, nah, as if there wasn't enough pressure. Hey, let's just drop the battalion commander with us on this battery air assault. So um, yeah, it was it was one of those things. Trial by fire, figure it out, learn by your mistakes, and just get better. And over time, you know, it was either sink or swim. Thankfully, I was able to swim, and I'm graceful enough to admit that that's because I had some section chiefs that had the experience, and I had a platoon sergeant that was willing to be like, "Hey, listen, let's get you spun up." So, that's just the way it worked. I had a platoon sergeant in Sergeant Jenkins. As soon as like me and him kind of started to gel, they were like, "Hey, you're going to be the master gunner now." Um, and then the next platoon sergeant came in, and he was like, "Hey, man, don't sweat it, bro. I got you." And he just continued to mentor to me. So I had two platoon sergeants back to back that were willing to work with me and make sure that I was spun up. And then right after that, I went over to senior leader course, and it just kept rolling. And then I ended up in the master gunner course. So it ended up working out.
When did you go to the senior leaders course?
Ooh, oh, that was a while back. 2000, like 18ish.
Did you have a an online portion before you went?
No, no, that was before they did all that online stuff. Everything we did was you went in the classroom, you had face to face with everybody, which I thought was so much better because you actually got to build some kind of connectivity with your peers. You got to network with other installations, and one of the beauties of that is like as soon as we graduated, now you have this network through every other installation, and whenever there was some kind of troubleshooting that came up with a 777, that a guy that might have been on a 119er his whole life, but now he's you know got switched over to a 777 battery and he wasn't familiar with it, he could reach out to a different installation, and he had somebody who had been on the 777 their whole life, and now he has a lot of connectivity with different artillery pieces.
Do you remember what you wrote your battlefield analysis paper on?
I have no idea.
Did you actually have to present it?
Uh,
I ask because I wrote mine, and I went into great detail about the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, and it was awesome, and I was super proud of it. And then we went in there, and I was supposed to be one of the first ones to present, and the instructor was like, "All right, all my 11 series guys, you can go ahead and put your papers on my desk, and you can leave for the day. All you Cav guys, line up." It's like, I've been working for 3 weeks on this thing. I'm super proud of this. I want to present this, but I guess I'll go fishing.
Dan wrote his paper on the disastrous air assault of the Roman legion at Battle of Teutoburg Forest.
well, Dan, I'm sorry they did that to you. That was wrong.
He brings it up every week.
Yes, every week.
Eventually, Dan, somebody's going to say, "Yeah, I do remember. I wrote my paper."
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. But okay. So after SLC, you stayed there. You stayed there in the 101st.
So I had a a plethora of hurdles while I was at the 101st, because I ended up in the warrior leader course. Excuse me. Yeah, warrior leader course. Is that what it's called? I don't even know what the hell it's called anymore. Um, but I ended up having several knee surgeries while I was there. So I left 3rd Brigade, WTB training battalion,
Warrior training. That's your
transition
recovery.
battalion.
Yeah.
The transition
Warrior
battalion.
transition battalion. Thank you. Um,
Yeah.
so I ended up there twice. So I went there because when we were getting ready to go to Afghanistan with 3rd Brigade, I ruptured everything in my knee again and ended up in the Warrior Transition Battalion, and that knocked me out of the fight for 2 years. Them trying to fix my knee. They had to cut my bone in half, put a metal shim inside my bone, and like replace all of the parts with cadaver parts. Um, I fought. They were going to med board me at that point, but then after that point, I fought and went back to the Rakasans with Sergeant Major Yakup, and then went over to Bravo Battery. So like, I got to stay in the 101st, which exactly what I wanted, um, and unfortunately, was short lived because like 8 months later, my ACL and my meniscus tore again. And they sent me right back over to Warrior Transition Battalion again. That point, they did total knee replacement.
And that was on the
So
same knee.
same knee. Um, so the issue that they have is because they cut my bone to put that metal shim in there. Now they have compromised my tibia because they cut my bone right there to put the total knee replacement. So if anything ever goes bad with the total knee replacement, now they have to amputate that leg. So
Yikes.
they were gonna med board me again. I fought that med board. I went back to 232 FA and finished my time as a platoon sergeant. And that brought me to Fort Sill.
At what point did you start thinking about writing the book? Is it something that you had in mind, like while you were in the valley, or is it something that's only occurred to you over the last couple of years, or what brought that on?
So the book was never supposed to happen.
You're
Um,
not the first person to tell us that.
Yeah.
so the The only reason the book happened was because of Andrew Bragg. The book happened because Andrew. I think Andrew texted me, either text me or call me, one or the other, and said, "Hey, I would appreciate it if you would read the chapter that I um, uh, wrote about Moon with you guys in it. I just want to make sure that there's nothing disrespectful about you guys that's in that chapter." And I said, "Okay." So he sent me the chapter, and I read it, and I replied, and I said, um, "I don't think that there's anything disrespectful in the chapter. I think that the chapter is it's very honest, um, and I think that it's very brutally honest. But just so you know, that's not how the story ends." And he said, "Well, I encourage you to write your own story. As a matter of fact, I think that it would be good for you to write your own story. And if you do, if you're willing to write your own story, like I can, I'd be willing to help you. Like William Yeski helped me, and I'd be willing to help you, to get your foot in the door if I can." And I thought about it a little while, and it was probably maybe a month or so later. Um, I wrote like the first chapter, and then I sent it over to him, and I said, "What do you think?" And he gave me some suggestions. Some were like too similar to what he had written, or whatever the case. So I changed up some stuff, sent it back to him, and he said, "Yeah, man, I think it sounds good. You should, keep going and see what happens." And just kept writing. But the book in its entirety was never a forethought. As a matter of fact, I was never one of those guys that kept a journal.
Yeah, same.
Like I never journaled in Afghanistan. That was never a thought. Like my time spent in Afghanistan was spent planning routes, um, going to the gym that was just outside of my sleeping quarters, and planning more routes. That's it. Like it was never like about what happens tomorrow, because you know um, that was never a thought in my head. Like
Yeah. When when you decided that you were going to go ahead and write the whole book, um, was that was that a difficult process for you to reach out and get a hold of some of the guys that you had served with, or the families for the guys that didn't make it back? Um, reliving some of those memories and those moments. Was that pretty difficult?
so some of it was extremely difficult. I reached out to some of our guys, and some of them reached back. Some of them I never heard from them. Some of them didn't want to take part, and I respect that uh, wholeheartedly. Some people want to leave the Dob where the Dob's at, and I respect that. Um, or maybe they just never got my message. I don't know. Uh, Family members, I did reach out, and I asked permission. Some reached back, some people didn't. I asked permission for pictures. Um, I asked for stories of loved ones, especially from Gold Star family members. I still speak to Brandon King's mom, Miss Frida. I speak to her often. Conveniently, the other day, I had a 2.5 hour conversation with her. Um, uh, so, uh, there were some parts that were extremely difficult. I had conversations with some of our guys. What we would do is we would set up uh, kind of like it wasn't Zoom calls. We would set up like FaceTime calls where we just have like a big group of guys that would call in at the same time, and we would just like have like a big bullshit fest, and we would talk about like as much as we could just get off our plate at one time about what happened during a period of time. And I remember at one point we had one of our one of our guys that started tearing up. I'm not going to mention any names, but he started tearing up, and I remember telling him he apologized, and I was like, man, don't apologize, man, don't apologize because like what you saw and what you feel is absolutely 100% real, and like don't apologize, please.
Yeah.
Um, when I got to the chapter to write about Lieutenant Weaver, um, like I couldn't even write that chapter. Like that's like I can tell this story 100 times, and in 100 times it's going to be exactly the same. Like I couldn't write the chapter because I knew that his wife is still there, and his daughter is still there, and knowing um, the way that story ends, like I just like for some reason, like I just couldn't tell the story, and I sat on that chapter. Like that's
The
the
words
chapter.
don't come out right.
Yeah, that's the chapter that when I got like the rest of the book was just flowing. It was going well, and I got to that chapter, and it was just like I hit a roadblock. And I reached out to Sergeant Casey, and I asked him what to do. Um, and he said if I were you, I would reach out to Emma, and explain who you are and what you're doing, and just see what she has to say. And since then, you know we've become friends. She wrote the foreword to the book, which I felt really passionate about having her write the foreword to the book because I wanted the book to start with how uh, how a family member was impacted by this deployment, because often family members are forgotten, and it's just like how deployments impact the soldiers, but like family members are kind of forgotten, and they fall in that gray space. But like I, I I wanted Emma to write the beginning. So if someone reads this book, you know I hope they read the foreword as well, because it's that foreword is very powerful. Um, but yeah, like it was very impactful. All of the interviews I did, um, and all of the people I reached out to that replied, every one of them had a big impact on me.
So you are now on you are not retired yet. You are on your way out the door.
I am out the I am low crawling with a ghillie suit, just like moving as fast as I can.
You are on your way out the door. Um, but and it's kind of hard to have a retrospective when you're still in it. But I'm sure that you have over the last couple of years really started reflecting on your time in service. So from Funky Nuts to the Dob to blowing out the same knee twice.
I was gonna say The Walking Dead with your cadaver knee. Yeah.
Would you do it all again? If you could go back, would you do it all again?
You know, um, there is, minus losing my friends, I would, I wouldn't, I wouldn't change anything. Um, I would somehow find that overlay that Sergeant Casey talks about, of Afghanistan, that shows where every route we took, where there's an IED next to that route. I would find that overlay somehow to prevent us from taking that route. Um, but other than that, um, I have loved my service. I have loved being a soldier. I have taken great pride in being a leader and being a mentor to young men and women in uniform. Um, I hope that I have been able to inspire as many people that have inspired me to be better. And I hope that in some way, shape, or form, when people will look back on their careers, they can feel the same way. Um, with that being said, the Army is a beautiful, wonderful organization that has the ability to take care of its people, but it also has a way to turn the other cheek towards the end. And I think it needs, I think if there's a way that there is, we do AARs in the Army, and I think if there's a way that the Army can do AARs with senior leaders, I think that that's something that would be very beneficial.
I agree, as long as they were honest.
I mean, this is something we talked about with Sergeant Major Chuck Ritter. That's almost exactly what he said as well, and the ability to have that reflection and take an honest assessment of ourselves as individuals and as an organization writ large. We would be a lot better off, but normally what ends up happening is, as Chuck did it, that you did good, you did good, you did good, you did good, we all did good. All right, we're good. I agree with you.
The book is supposed to be coming out in the Army magazine. Sergeant Major Schroeder, former Force Sergeant Major, did a review on it. And I talked to him, and I told him the same thing, that I think at some point or another, I believe that the Army needs to just take a pause with senior leaders right before they get out and actually listen. Like, don't just brush it away, but actually listen and take what they say and take it to heart, and implement something. Even if it's just one thing, implement something that they said that can be fixed and make it better for somebody else. And I think that that one microcosm of effort can make a monumental difference for somebody.
Well, before we let you go, a couple of last things. Um, we're going to air this episode. Uh, it's going to be a pretty quick turnaround, but we're going to air this episode before the book comes out. So when does the book come out, and where can people go and get it?
The book will be out June 15th. It can be found on Amazon. It can be found on the Casemate website, Casemate Publishers, and any other bookstore.
And Audible eventually. I already saw it on Audible. The I'm not gonna say it right. The pre-order, I guess you would call it. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the last question I've got is you never did say how that air assault with the artillery battalion commander went.
The air assault with the battalion commander initially started off very rough. We had a howitzer that landed with one tire in a canal and one tire out. However, kudos to the commander. He ran over as well as I. We grabbed the howitzer and we all got with the crew, pushed the howitzer out of the canal, spun the tube,
Oof.
got the gun in place, still on time, met time. FDC sent down the fire missions, and we fired the battery because no gun was out of the fight.
I don't know how if we could possibly end it any better than that.
Joe, thanks so much. Thanks for writing the book. This has been awesome. We encourage everybody to go out and get your book, obviously, but then the whole series, so that they can hear the story. You know,
The
for
Arghandab trilogy.
Yeah, across multiple perspectives, and
All of them, they're great. All three of them.
yes, they are. They
Perfect.
are.
All
I
right.
can't thank
Thanks,
you enough,
brother.
Joe. This has been great.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, everyone. Well, we're back, and Dan and I had a wardrobe change.
Yes.
For anybody people that are watching, we are in different shirts because it is a day and a half after we recorded because of some tech reasons, but we're here.
Well, that
so,
and when we got done recording, it was late.
That
It
too.
was late. So there's a
there's
time zone.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do our points on Mr. Fontenot. So I'll hand it off to you. What are your initial thoughts?
I don't know that if I had, you know, if I had gone on with my life, you know, after high school and not joined the military, I don't know if I had hit 30 years old that I would have enlisted at that point. I mean, that's not the oldest that I've seen, but that's still up there. I mean, that is a lot of life packed in to up and turn things around and say, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna enlist.
It's
I mean, especially because he's sitting there rocking out with, you know, rock and roll bands and stuff.
yeah. It's that the age, that entry age is interesting because there's a couple different ways it can be interpreted. One is what looks like how it was for him, and that's he's coming in as a little bit older guy, and people are looking at him in a respectful way because he's experienced and older and a little more mature and all these things. That seems like for some folks, though, that could cut in the opposite direction, and it's like you're 30 years old and you're here. Like, where did your life go wrong, and what kind of person are we dealing with here? So, thankfully, it doesn't appear that he had to deal with that. So, and that's of course a testament to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially during my time. So just to kind of bring the age thing into focus too. Well, I came in as a very, junior officer, of course, in my early 20s. And the timing worked out that when I came in 04, there were a handful of, I was in the 82nd. There were a handful of guys who were generally older than your traditional junior enlisted. At this point, a lot of them too might have even been junior E5 sergeants. And that was because of 9/11. So these were I say guys, of course, this is include the gals too, but I was in an artillery and an infantry unit, so it was all dudes. But these were guys who were very different walks of life. 9/11 happens, and they dropped what they were doing and enlisted.
Yeah.
So, I had a marine biologist. I had a guy who was working on a second master's degree in, classical music and was a, first chair in the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra. Like, I'm not even joking. Like,
Yeah,
that's the kind of
we had a guy that was he was the head chef at a 5-star Michelin restaurant or
like a
something like
Michelin
that.
restaurant. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he was definitely taking a sideways step by joining
Yeah.
the infantry. And then he lost part of his finger in Afghanistan. So
What, as a brief aside, I mean, did he go back to being a chef? Do you know?
yeah, he did his one
Okay.
tour. Did I think it was a full 4 years. But yeah, he went to Afghanistan, served his country, and I don't think he was from New York City, but I'm pretty sure he was from New York.
Okay.
But yeah, he
Yeah. The
got
military is a big, 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 I shouldn't even say organization, a group of organizations, and there's so many cool and interesting people in it, and that's why we do this show, right? So
yeah,
back to Joe.
yeah,
So he goes through basic training, and I mean, maybe to jump to the end a little bit, I mean, the guy had a very successful career, and
yes,
he injuries and all, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. So, okay, so he goes to Korea very early on. I'm quite familiar with where he was up in Kanhobi and Dongachon, and that's like Joe Central. So if you're a young soldier and you were interested in just partying and getting into trouble, that's exactly the place that you go. Sounds like he kept his nose clean, but he was exposed to a couple people who saw some things in him and said, "Hey, Joe, this is one path you could take, or there's some stuff that probably suits you a little better." And it sounds like you took him off on that offer when he got back from Korea.
yeah. He was on his bus ride to his unit, like from the
Yeah.
airport, and just a random NCO who's in charge of that transportation shuttle or whatever was like, "Hey, correspondence courses." And I joined the army so long enough ago that correspondence courses, you signed up for them, and you were then mailed the yellow books of different sizes depending on what that stack was. And I think you had 30 days to complete it. But by the time he came in, it was probably pretty much all online by that point. But man, he's the first person I've heard talk about correspondence courses in a long time. But
Well,
that was the thing to do,
for those
right?
who don't know, please explain what they are.
A correspondence course is, think of online classes that you can take, because that's essentially what it is. But it teaches, you can sign up for, I think there were 200 and change when I was going through it. Now I'm sure there's probably even more, and it's probably directly online. But they were on everything from radios to tactics to weapon systems to uh, you know military decision making process, anything and everything under the sun that you could improve yourself on. And some of them were super easy, some of them were much more difficult, but you did those courses and you were given sort of, basically you did them for promotion points. You weren't getting a college degree out of it, but because the point system fluctuated wildly, uh, for especially for E5, then having a few correspondence courses in your pocket could absolutely make the difference between you getting promoted immediately as soon as you pass the board, or having to wait 6 months for points to get low enough
Yeah.
for you to get promoted. So
Well, I'm happy to hear that a NCO, not even in his rating chain, would proffer that kind of advice, which is good advice,
yeah,
but that also that he would have the maturity to take him up on it, which kind of gets after what Joe was talking about early on, and that's if I am standing before somebody with more rank than me, I'm going to assume, until proven otherwise, that this person has earned it and is highly qualified and knows what they're talking about. And sounds like that attitude served him well, particularly when he was junior.
Yeah, yeah, and then that is definitely a, I don't want to say a rarity, but from my experience, it is certainly not always the case. Certainly not always the case when you have a younger or a lower ranking but biologically older, you know, soldier who is, outranked and subordinate to somebody much younger but of higher rank.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it
So,
definitely,
okay.
he definitely went in with a healthy mindset, and it served him
Yeah.
well throughout. Part of that is probably because of the age and maturity. So yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So he goes to 101st, which is what he wanted.
which apparently
He,
was just his dream location throughout his career, because he,
yeah.
wherever he went, he always wanted to go back.
For those who are not watching but listening, he had in the background, behind, recording behind his head, was I don't know, a flag or a mural of some sort. It was hard to tell, but it was a World War II era. Well, it would have been a paratrooper, for the 101st, but it was like a skull
Yeah,
face. It's real, rugged military styled thing, but obviously 101st guy through and through. And I tried not to hold it against him, but it is what it is. Okay, so he goes to the 101st, and then deploys, but so he's an artilleryman. He goes to the 101st, but he doesn't deploy in an artillery mission.
yeah,
They go over to Iraq and do it in a maneuver or an infantry style deployment. So you have to think of that as you go through all your AIT and your training, and you spend. I know in Korea, I know the unit that he was in, the artillery unit up there, and they go hard artillery up there. I mean, like that's the task force that is. So I know he would have trained hard on his artillery tasks there, and then to show up to the 101st and do a complete 180 must have been very jarring, particularly as a young guy.
yeah. And I mean, he was in a Paladin while he was in Korea, and then
Mm-hmm.
he's back on the ground with the 101st. So I mean, shift of focus, right?
Right.
But yeah, going to Iraq and basically being in a more maneuver element, I guess, because they were, it was coin, it was the hearts and minds battle,
Yeah.
but
Counterinsurgency.
they were I guess it was more, they were more of a security element for the people that were actually interacting with the locals,
Yeah.
which it helps to have that diversity of experience.
We didn't get into it, but the numbers wise and structurally, an artillery and an infantry unit are very different. I mean, I'm putting aside the fact that one has cannons and one doesn't, but an infantry unit is much larger than an artillery unit is, just because an infantry squad is bigger than a crew on a howitzer. Just so it's math. So it's not a great one-to-one comparison if you're a non-infantry unit who's doing an infantry style mission. It's not going to be the exact same. So by definition, you're kind of having to make stuff up as you go along. Ask me how I know.
Yeah. Well, at least they didn't go over their. At least they didn't go over there blind to that. They were given the task. I think he said, right before, or they put together that infantry platoon
Yeah.
right before they went to JRTC. So at least they had, some time to train up, on the most basic of you know tactics and skills
Yeah.
before they headed over.
For those listening, JRTC is the Joint Readiness Training Center, which is in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and it is a place where many, not all, units will go prior to a deployment in order to get, we'll just say, certified. Put your air quotes up there. So just they get tested on all the tasks that they've been training on for the preceding months in order to get out the door to go on a deployment. There's also one in
There's three
Germany,
major
and there's
training
also
centers.
and there's one in Death Valley in Southern California. So okay, now we're up to speed. Okay, so deploys to Iraq. This would have been his first deployment. He didn't talk much about his time there, other than he met a lot of interesting people and learned a lot of interesting things, but we didn't really belabor
It's
that much.
spent a lot of time at the gym,
Yeah, a lot of gym time. So
which he did throughout his career.
if you look at the guy, he's complete solid muscle. It's ridiculous, but okay. So comes back from that deployment and does some of his professional military education, the NCO schooling, and then if I recall, they're just back out the door for another deployment pretty soon
Yeah,
after. A little more than a year, I think he said.
yeah. This
So
time to
this would be
Afghanistan.
the deployment. Yeah, and this would be the deployment that he's based his book on.
Sons of the Arghandab. He goes in there and
So, yeah,
does a relief in place with Andrew Bragg's platoon. Really,
yeah,
I mean, it was the same battalion as Will Yeski's,
yeah,
uh, but Joe's platoon goes in and replaces Andrew Bragg's platoon,
yeah,
uh, and a they had a hard go of it.
yeah,
But one of the things that struck me when I was reading the book, and he sort of alluded to this, which is why I asked him the question about what it was like when he came in and relieved the 82nd, and he said it was Lord of the Flies.
how
When
dare he? Yes,
when they came in and relieved the 82nd, they had a very similar reaction to when uh, Andrew Bragg's platoon got to that location a year before and relieved the striker guys that were there before
the
them.
2ID, I believe. Yeah,
So it's like that valley does something to the units that are there. And if you read
I,
the
I
books, you'll see what
yeah,
that is.
I will say, regardless of where the deployment is, there's kind of a unit chauvinistic thing that takes place when one unit replaces another, that they always just assume the unit before them were idiots, and that we're clearly we're the best and the brightest and the smartest, and we'll do everything perfectly and leave everything better than we found it, and the people that came ahead of us were all idiots. It can be a little unbecoming, but it is a pervasive attitude. Certainly in the Army. I will not speak for the other services.
But they had a rough time of it, and I
Yeah,
encourage everybody to go out and get the book,
yeah,
either a hard copy or when it comes out on Audible or whatever the other, I don't know, audio only platforms that it will come out on are. I encourage everybody to get it out. It is just like the first two. It is there's some parts that are tough to get through, uh, but uh, it is it is a good way to
yeah.
close out the story of the American forces in the Arghandab River Valley. There, uh, yeah, did a good job.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to kind of wrap this part up, he's retiring now. He's still serving, but he is on his way out the door. He's a senior non-commissioned officer. We won't get into the specifics. You can talk to him about that, but just really neat guy. And he reached out to us. This is and that was kind of brokered by Andrew Bragg, and kind of originating with Will Yeski. So
Mhm.
really glad he reached out to us and that we could help in this any way that we can to help kind of push the book and just ultimately it's not about selling books, it's about getting these stories out because they need to be
Yeah,
told, which is what we do here. That is our raison d'etre. So
yeah.
there's some French for you, Dan. I know you're a francophile. Okay, anything else on our friend Joe before we transition?
There is there is so much more that we could have gotten into with him. We were talking to him, after we were done recording, and I mean, the guy was the Soldier of the Year,
He didn't
and
even mention that.
I mean, he they asked him like who he wanted to meet or where he wanted to go or whatever, and he wanted to do PT with then Sergeant Major of the Army Daly,
yeah.
and he did. He didn't say whether it was a smoke session or not. He just said it was
He
good
did send
PT.
us some pictures of them working out, though. I mean, it was a legit workout. It wasn't,
Yeah,
just
it was definitely a
yeah.
legit workout. And I mean, just from throughout his entire story, he talks about how much time he spent in the gym, not just spent in the gym, but then also rehabbing from blowing up his leg three
his knee
times.
was
I mean,
at
just
least
shot.
Yeah.
Just oh man, rough.
The Walking Dead with his cadaver knee. There you go.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good guy.
I will always love Sergeant Major of the Army Daly because he gave the thumbs up on the black PT socks.
Yeah.
Those who know. Okay.
Yeah. But Joe's got a great story, and as with pretty much every one of our our guests here, we could have talked to him for hours and hours more, which we actually did. This time once the recording was over.
Yeah, that's a little peek behind the curtain with everybody. I mean, we have very long off the record conversations with people, in addition to the long conversations we have on camera. So,
yeah.
Okay, and we'd like to think we maintain friendships with some or all of our guests, and basically everybody's always got an open door to come back. We'll figure out what that looks like when we start bringing like return guests.
How about this for a tease? We were talking to Joe, and he keyed us in on something that might be happening in the future with the story of the Arghandab.
Yeah,
and
that is true.
Depending on how that develops, maybe we can get all three of them back together because they're all three involved in it. Maybe we can get all three of them
off the record
together.
discussion, and it could be big.
Yeah, could be big. How's that for a teaser?
Oh man. Okay, we're going to transition here to the Free Fire area now because the aforementioned technical snafus that we had, this kind of threw off my timing because when we were recording this on a Wednesday evening, this was going to be our Red Friday question, which today's Friday. Anyway, the question to you, sir, is what type or where, however you choose to answer this, is the best barbecue?
Oh, North Carolina barbecue is the best. But here's the thing. North Carolina barbecue is separated into basically 4 regions. So you have the mustard based, which is
that's South Carolina,
right? That's southern North Carolina.
Okay.
Then you get the northern and central part of the state where it's vinegar based. And then you get towards the western end of the state, it starts getting to be like, Kentucky, Tennessee, and it's ketchup or tomato sauce based.
Yeah.
Obviously, where we are located, we have a great combination of the vinegar based and mustard based. I prefer the mustard based. Expounding a little bit, Kansas City barbecue is overrated. St. Louis barbecue is, I don't know. It's a sweet, sticky mess, and
your Midwestern are going to be more tomato-based, sauce-based barbecues. So
it's super sweet and sticky and messy, and it is just, it's good. I wash my hands like 50 times a day, and eating sloppy barbecue like that is a nightmare for me.
Well, pro tip, I mean, wear the gloves when you're eating, man. What about so you left Texas and Memphis off the table?
Yeah,
what do you think?
Or no, I said St. Louis. What I meant was Memphis.
Okay.
Texas.
St. Louis does have its own style, by the way, but
yeah,
Memphis is a dry rub.
Texas probably has several different, given the size of the state, it is probably got several styles. I am not familiar enough. I have not spent enough time in
Yeah.
Texas to be versatile enough on that.
Yeah.
What I did have in San Antonio was amazing.
Like brisket.
That was brisket and ribs and the what is it, the
Yeah.
chiseled beef tip
It's the
sandwiches.
tips. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, it was good.
Yeah. So I don't claim to be an expert on these things, but I know a thing or two. One of the we're speaking in huge generalizations here, but one of the biggest differentiations between barbecue is going to be the east or west of the Mississippi. So east, it's generally going to be a pork based barbecue because we have an abundance of pork in the South. Why? Because it's the South. That's why. Once you get west of the Mississippi, it tends to be more beef focused because it's west of the Mississippi. So that's kind of a good jumping off point. Then from there, you're going to have your dry rubs and your sauce variations that are going to be regional and even sub-regional. But that's kind of where it
Yep.
goes from there. So as for me, I tend to agree with you. I'm a Carolina barbecue guy myself. I mostly grew up here in the Carolinas mostly, so that's kind of what I know. I tend to be more of the vinegar based, but the mustard is good too. But the uber alles correct answer is that all barbecue is good and that you can't go wrong. That is the correct answer.
That's pretty fair. That's pretty fair. I'm not going to say no to barbecue.
I've never seen you push away a plate of Memphis style ribs a single time.
No, I'm not going to. I have my preferences, but
Fair enough.
even the lowest form of barbecue, which would probably be in some California or New York bistro style, that's
New York City.
you know, some uber douchey, person who's never actually done anything, and he cooks
Now,
his
Dan,
ribs in a grill or something.
there's
Yeah.
probably some hipster restaurant in New York City in the Bronx that probably makes excellent barbecue.
And when I say a grill, I mean grill with the E on the end.
Of course. So, okay. Well, we can't thank everybody enough for listening and watching the show. Thank you so much for just being there for us, being there for all these other veterans. It's the month of May, so it's Military Appreciation Month. It's also Mental Health Awareness Month. So to that end, call a buddy. Joe mentioned it in his episode, and I know of another case that's kind of a few steps removed from myself here of another suicide. Just call your buddies, check on them. I can't stress that enough, and it's just people matter. Okay.
The war, the war on foreign shores may be over, but the war within still rages on. So call your buddies and check on them.
Yeah. So we're on all the socials. You can find us there. Please like, share, subscribe us there. We put something out pretty much every single day. We like to put shorts out that are, little snippets of these longer episodes on YouTube Rumble. Check us out there. We appreciate everything, and take us out, Dan.
And remember, your service matters.